Welcome to Growing Up in Easton. My name is Priscilla Almquist Olsen. I'm host today, October 29th, 2015. And although we normally have people who were born here in Easton, whom we call townies, we have today the pleasure of having an honorary townie with us. And I'm pleased to welcome Gloria Freitas Steidinger.
Mm-hmm.
And she has lived in Easton for 65 years?
Just about. Well, yes, pretty close to 65 years.
Okay. And most of you have seen the beautification of Easton over many, many years, which Gloria has led. She is a floral designer. She's been all over the world teaching her skills. She has been to the White House, and well, she's going to talk about her beginnings, her early beginnings. And so welcome, Gloria.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for, and to think I'll be no longer called a transient. They used to call me that, you know, all along, all the years I lived here. Of course, Gloria, you're a transient. But I'm so happy you've just made my whole day.
Good.
So, what shall we start with?
I want you to tell me a little bit about your early beginnings, your childhood and so forth, and what were the qualities of your home life, your school life, your community life, which influenced the path that you took in your life.
I will do it in a nutshell. And I spent my first few years in Lexington, in the woods. And this was what time of the era was that? 1932.
As you can see, because the camera is giving a very good close-up of Gloria, that she is very well preserved.
Ooh!
And I think it has something to do with the air in Easton, as well as our genetic backgrounds, because I too am very well preserved.
And you really are.
Thank
of
you.
course, I don't know how old you are.
Oh, I'm 73.
Oh, to be 73
I
again.
I know you would.
But anyway, I spent up until age 9 during the Depression living in Lexington, and my father was able to get a sort of a bungalow for us to live in. So we did live in a home, and it was only 3 rooms. And the bungalow was deep in the woods of Lexington and surrounded by woods. There were a few houses there, but that's where my love of the woods started, because my bosom buddy down the road and me would go out, and we would just travel through the woods. And being the second born of 7 children, my mother really didn't have time to worry about me. So I was in the woods practically every day, and I just loved nature. And I remember I could take you, to this day, I could take you to a stand of wild columbine that just was absolutely gorgeous. At any rate, after that, we moved to, and of course, from 9 years old, then it was 32, and 9 years would be 9, 12. So it was like 19, the war was almost over, the Second World War. And my father worked so diligently, and he just, well, let me tell you, the 3-room house that we were in had no running water. It had an outhouse, and we used the water from down the road from the swamp for bathing. And the drinking water, my father had an old jalopy, and he would put this huge glass jugs, I don't know if you remember them, they were about this high, and with a narrow opening. And for drinking and cooking, he would go to Arlington, and in Arlington there was a spring that was constantly running onto the road. So a lot of people would go and get their drinking water there and bring it back home for cooking. So it was the humble beginnings. But my love of the woods started in Lexington, and because my father worked so hard, and eventually, because we always had a vegetable garden, we always had chickens, we always had all sorts of, and you know, I never felt poor. You probably feel the same way.
And you know, I had Alice McCarthy and Wayne Legg, who were classmates. I had them on the show, and they talked about that too. They never felt poor. There was always enough food, but everybody was in the same boat here in Easton, and everyone had chickens, and everyone grew their garden, and everyone knew how to can.
Oh, my mother's always canning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to think that you were 7 kids, 2 adults, 9 people in a 3-room house.
Can you imagine?
No.
Can you imagine? Oh. And to this day, I don't think I've ever slept alone. Because even when we moved to Norwood, I slept with my sister. And then, of course, I married at age 22, and I slept with my husband. So whenever my husband was gone, say he on a trip, a business trip or whatever, just loved lying all by myself. It was just wonderful. But anyway, let's go back to moving to Norwood. The reason we moved to Norwood is that because my father, both my mother and father were from Italy, and they were immigrants. But my father was 17 when he came over, and he would deliver water to the workers, to the construction workers. And that was his first job as 17. But pretty soon he was watching the heavy equipment and how to run it. And pretty soon he was running what we call the steam shovel. But right now it's not run by steam, it's run by who knows what. You've seen them. They have a big shovel on the end.
Right.
And he was doing beautifully at that. Well, at that time, the war was almost over, and we started building in Norwood. They started building homes. The first home that was built in Norwood at the old Gay Farm, which was a huge area, the very first house that was built, my father was able to purchase it brand new with a bathroom. And it was, my mother was absolutely thrilled. And he was always in demand by other bosses in the area. They wanted him to come and work for them because he had that ethic, that work ethic. But in the meantime, in Norwood, again, we were able to buy an extra lot behind the house, which backed up to woods. And I was in seventh heaven because I spent my time in Norwood with a hammer and a nail. We were building huts and crossing the stream and all that. And so that was, I just loved Norwood and the fact that we did have woods in the back of the house. However, the whole field between the two bridges, if you've ever been through Norwood, you would see that there's nothing but homes. And that was the beginning of all the homes being built in Norwood. This that you have in front of you started when I met Louis Freitas and moved to Easton. And Alice, you mentioned Alice McCarthy, who was one of my best friends for years and years and years. Our children grew up together. And Mrs. McCarthy, her mother-in-law, Charlie's mother, wanted Alice to join the garden club. Well, she joined, and Alice said to me, "You're going to join too." And so I joined, and all of a sudden my whole world opened up. Competition and flower arranging, and I could go on and on and on. And so in the competition, and it was competition, it was blue ribbons, so forth. Do you remember Mary Harvey? The
Yes.
school teacher. Well, she was one of my competitors. And of course, she was so much older than me, but she was a fabulous designer. And also, Hazel Varela, her mother was a member.
Mrs. Luke.
And you knew that she was a flower arranger at the, where the chocolate chip cookies, where was that?
Oh, Ruth Wakefield.
And she did all the flower
At the
arrangements.
Toll House.
Yeah. And
in
so
Whitman.
so she was one of my mentors. And it was, and that's basically how it happened. And I think the more ribbons I won, the more appreciation I was getting.
So but the influence of all that, all that wandering in the woods, and seeing the lady slippers pop up in May, and all the ground covers
wonderful.
when what's that stuff that you can't pick anymore, but we used to pick it for wreaths?
Yes.
Princess something.
Princess Pine.
Princess Pine.
And the botanical name is Pipsissewa. Now, I have to tell you a quick story about Pipsissewa. Do you remember Grant? What was his first name? There's land in his name.
Yes.
Kippy Grant.
Right.
Kippy Grant. And Allison was in the.
He was also born Clifford.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yes, Clifford Grant.
I knew him as Kippy Grant, and he was a conservationist, and there is land in his name right now. And he and Alice knew each other because Alice became a member of the Conservation Commission, and so forth. And he was telling Alice and me about fabulous brook that is so beautiful, he said, and Alice and I really wanted to see it. So he took us into the woods, and as we're going along in the woods, Alice and I would go, oh, a striped pipsissewa. Wow. For years following, every time we saw him, he'd say, he says, striped pipsissewa. But anyway, so we had a wonderful time. I had a wonderful time growing up in Easton. And when I was married, I was lucky on Turnpike Street. There was woods in the backyard that backed up almost to the country club, the Pine Oaks Country Club. And I was always in there, through the paths and so forth. So I was lucky there. Then we moved to Willow Road, and sure enough, it was the Simpson Spring behind us. So I was always in the woods, and most of the time I was either with Alice McCarthy or so forth.
Well, many of us grew up next to the woods. I mean, my childhood home, which I came back to 12 years ago and live there now, is right next to the woods, which Mrs. Ames then, on my dad's suggestion, donated it to NRT, Natural Resources Trust, and so it's now part of the whole sheep pasture.
I didn't know that.
Yep, whole sheep pasture thing, yep.
And aren't you thrilled that you're right next door to
Yes,
the
and I used to run in there every spring and get poison ivy. And also I used to pick lady slippers because the woods floor just abounded with lady slippers.
Nowadays you'd be arrested.
No, yes, you can't do that. But what's happened is that thanks to the birds or other animals, I have some perpetual ones that grow up in my backyard.
Oh, aren't you lucky? Because after Louis passed away, God rest his soul, I met at the 50th class reunion, I met a fellow that I knew in Norwood that used to give me rides whenever he saw me waiting for the bus. And he had a Jeep, and I would hop out of the Jeep, thank you, thank you, thank you, and that was it. And he arrived at the 50th class reunion, and I said, you used to give me rides. And he said, oh, you live down in Skunk Hollow. Skunk Hollow? I never knew I lived in Skunk Hollow. He said, oh, yes. Because he lived up on Christian Hill, and I lived down in Skunk Hollow. But anyway, it was a good lead.
Well, you were saying then you finally married the man, right?
Yes, I did. But,
and his name is Paul Steidinger.
I know, but it was after I was talking to.
But anyway,
lady slippers. Don't remind me about lady slippers. He's been fantastic, and he's absolutely will do everything in the yard, and he has done all sorts of wonderful things in my yard
under your supervision and direction.
Yes, and also something Louis always wanted to do, but he passed away, and if he was going to pick somebody, he would have picked Paul, because Paul is just that type. Do you know one of his favorite people, Louis' favorite people, was Alan Watts? Do you remember Alan Watts?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
He was the most wonderful man, but he was the same type as Paul. They were always doing things for people. Yeah. At any rate, but he mowed my lady slippers down.
No.
Without knowing it.
Oh, Paul?
I never told him, though.
Uh-oh.
Anyway, sorry, Paul.
So anyway, after Willow Road, was it?
Oh, from Willow Road, we went into Eisenhower Drive. And
you were hopping around.
And of course, he was in real estate.
Yeah.
And that backed up to the Moss's Pond. Oh, what a wonderful trip. I mean, every morning, out the back door, my Springer would be waiting, my Springer Spaniel, and we would jog along the pond and all the way back. Sometimes I went all the way to the NRT, through the Swedish cemetery. Now, was that a Swedish cemetery?
Oh, you mean the Southeastern?
Is that
Southeastern Mass?
They told me that was a Swedish cemetery.
Well, that's because three-quarters of the people buried there are Swedish.
Well, that's why.
And I counted 71 graves with the name Anderson on it.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah. So, and my grandparents are both there, Alma and Sander Larson. And my Aunt Ag, my mother's sister,
that's why
Agnes.
They call it the Wiedemann.
But and then the other half, the part close to the road, is of course all the Yankees. So Copeland's has a big stone.
I saw that. Yes.
Yeah, and the Wattses are there.
Yes. But anyway, so my trip sometimes ended up at the NRT by going through the path and through the Swedish cemetery, and then the back of where the solar panels are at Stony Hill College.
Yeah, sure.
And then onto the sheep's pasture, and I loved living there. But then, should I say this?
After that, didn't you end up on Allen Road?
Okay, so then building everywhere. One of the buildings that was going on was the Queesit, you know, the apartments.
Oh, yeah,
What do they
Queesit
call those?
Commons.
Queesit Commons, very near to my backyard. And I said to Louis, let's live somewhere else where there's woods. Well, Louis liked to go to auctions of land that was being put up for auction for non-payment of taxes. Well, 40 acres on Allen Road went up for auction. And Louis zoomed up there, and 40 acres became ours.
Wonderful, yeah. You've developed that. It's a beautiful place.
Thank you. I did give 15 acres of it to the Conservation Commission.
Uh-huh.
Well, I sold it a little bit, but it's theirs. But anyway.
Do you know that Easton has 38% of its land mass in conservation?
Yes, and you know why?
Do you know how much that is? That's an incredible tribute to our you know, reverence for the land.
Yes, and that's why I love Easton.
Right.
Because to me, this is not like Norwood, where they, now will they be listening to me, where they really didn't they weren't concerned with that.
No, and they didn't have the vision.
They didn't have the vision. Now, if you went to Norwood,
No.
I don't know where the land is that's been preserved.
Yeah. Now let's get back to. So we know now
right.
why you're. You know, you were. You saw all the wildflowers popping up in the spring, and you saw the. You know, all the verdure really of this the native plants of this area, and then Alice Kent McCarthy got you into that
The
garden club, and of course you met my mother.
Oh,
Enid-
yes.
Enid-
Oh, I forgot about Enid. Well, Enid was absolutely fabulous. In every way. She was not only into flowers, she would bring tons and tons and tons of blue hydrangeas back from the Cape, and where we would make our wreaths out of them. And she also was some sort of a caterer, because whenever we had a big meeting, she would always be there with her punch bowl and her little canopies and so forth. And really,
And my mother did catering. She decided when we were in junior high school, I think, she started thinking, oh, they have to go to college. Where's the money coming from? So she started catering. And she had been making Swedish pastries and
delicious.
things. I know, melt in your mouth. Wienerbröd is what it's called, which actually means bread from Vienna. But they were light, very puffy, light little things. But anyway, she did that, you know, and then of course I got a full scholarship to college, but nevertheless, she loved doing it, loved it. And I'm back in that small kitchen now.
are you?
And I can't imagine, I had the whole thing renovated, but I can't imagine that
Being
the
able to
kitchen is the
cater.
same size. It may have new cabinets, but it's the same size. And imagine that she could produce what she did out of that little kitchen. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and she
Unbelievable.
was always, no matter what we did, she was always there.
Yes,
Always
and Nancy
there.
Gohano, whom you know, who's a past president of the Eastern Garden Club, as you are, she will remind me that my mother would be just so ashamed of me, because not only do I not know the Latin names, I don't even know the English names.
Yes, and not only that, but she bought a wreath from me for her daughter Priscilla
She did?
at one of the fairs. But anyway.
Okay, well, let's get back. So anyway, you suddenly took off in the Eastern Garden Club.
Right, and you saw that.
Yeah, but let's talk about that. Now, this is a photo that goes back to 1962, and we'll insert this later. And here is a very young Gloria Freitas with her 4 little toddlers here, but also
Alice McCarthy
Alice McCarthy.
and T. Bassett.
And what was Mrs. Bassett's name? First name?
I only called her T.
T. Bassett. And we all know Jeff Bassett, her son, who's a local contractor from Eastondale, Pine Street.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So
And
anyway,
so because they're
where were you?
Well, I was at the town hall pruning for the Eastern Garden Club. Now, because you could see my children are sitting there, and they're tiny, and that's one of my first things to do in Easton, to beautify Easton. And then I could go on again, and I was showing you this, and we'll show this on the screen, I guess. But should I go into Blanche Ames
Yes.
at Borderland? Well, she was calling a lot of the businessmen to her bedside. She was not well. She was obviously elderly.
She passed away in 1969.
Right, and she was calling different business people around town to her bedside. Well, Louis, my husband, was called to her bedside for her to say to him, you have to preserve the Oaks Ames Memorial Hall. Because at that time, the rumor was going that it was going to be torn down.
Really?
Oh, yes, and they were going to, either that or they were going to have the town offices. There was all sorts of rumors going on. So, Eleanor Ames came into town. Now, she was John Ames's second wife. And she came into town and she heard about it and so forth. She gathered us, and here we are in the picture. She gathered a few of us, and we started an organization. And we used to have Friday night dances at the Oaks Ames Memorial Hall. And they were so wonderful. But on an aside, I'll have to tell you that John Ames, her husband, absolutely made sure everybody wore a suit and tie.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, one of them, and I won't mention who it is, came, took his jacket off. Well, he jumped out of his seat and he went right. I won't tell you who it is. I'll tell you later.
Okay.
At any rate, so Eleanor and I would, for the Friday night dances, we would get in her car and we'd go all over Easton and pick wild stuff like weeping willow and all sorts of things to decorate the dance with. So that we were trying to make money for the hall.
Right.
And there is a room now named after Eleanor Ames. And
that's in the Oaks Ames Memorial Hall?
and that's in the Oaks Ames Memorial Hall. And I remember years and years later, I did a program for her garden club up in New Hampshire. She had a winter home up there. And she wasn't feeling very well. Things weren't going well because he had died and so forth. And I did my program, but before I started, I told them all about Eleanor, who was in the audience, and what she did for Easton and the Oaks Ames Memorial Hall. And I went on and on. I got home, and her friend Dottie Diotto, do you know the Diottos? Well, anyway, rang my doorbell with a bottle of champagne. She says, I just got a call from Eleanor. She told me to go and get a bottle of champagne and deliver it to Gloria. Well, anyway. That's just I love these little stories because, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so going on and on, here's another picture. This is, I belong to the committee for the beautification, Village Improvement Committee. And at one of our meetings,
And this was under the Easton Garden Club?
Easton Garden Club. In one of our meetings, we were asked, different people, what part of Easton would you like to beautify? And I said, I hosey Main Street. Because Main Street was where Louis' business was, and I was after him for years. Why don't you put flowers in a window box in front of your Freitas agency?
Right.
And I thought, oh, this is my chance. So I was in charge of Main Street, and I thought, we'll put them in front of all the stores. And I went to the regional school, and I talked to a gentleman by the name of Mr. Thompson, and I asked him if his students in the woodworking would make window boxes, and sure enough, he said yes. All I had to do was get Fernandes lumber, remember Fernandes lumber?
Yeah.
To deliver the wood, and they made those window boxes for every single business on Main Street. And then we got the liners, and we filled them with soil, and we went to a wholesale place, and we bought little tiny plants, but unfortunately, we put them all in, and that year, they died immediately because two reasons. One of them was a lot of the members didn't know how to plant, and because I had a lot of our members.
Right.
And the other reason is these flowers, they were too small and newly planted, and they were against a south-facing plate glass windows that were like ovens.
Oh, yeah.
And so they just all wilted, no matter how many times we watered. So at any rate, Sue Henderson of Henderson Floor, way up on Bay Road, noticed everything, and she called me and she said, why don't you let me start them in our greenhouse in January, and you pick out the colors and the flowers, and I will start the seeds in January, and then by the time Memorial Day comes, when you want to bring them out, they'll be all ready to go. And so that went on for years.
How nice.
Yeah, wasn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway.
So, and then, of course,
Now they're hanging, and you know why they're hanging. They're no longer window boxes. We had to get rid of them because of the renovation of Main Street.
right.
And so
But it's a lovely, lovely look.
it is a nice look. And so I went to, what's his name? Oh, Foley. I want to
You
give
know,
him
one
credit.
thing that I was a little disappointed in, and probably because somebody never even thought of it, and I've seen it in other communities, you know, where they have replicas of their light posts, and ours are actual replicas of the lanterns that existed in the early 1900s,
Yes.
gas lanterns. But some of them have a place, you know, arms that came out
I know it.
to hang on both sides, beautiful floral
And do you know why we
baskets.
don't have them?
Why?
Because at the meetings where they informed us of what they're going to put on Main Street, I raised my hand because, you know, Freitas Agency, I was allowed to go to that meeting.
Right.
And I said, what about putting flowers, hanging the baskets on the light posts, and we could run a system under the sidewalk before you do anything to the sidewalks, and we'll go up the post, and we'll put our drip system on automatic. And they said they couldn't do it. Now, why couldn't they do it? I can't remember. There was a reason why they couldn't do it. So that was the end of that. Wouldn't it have been nice?
Absolutely.
Wouldn't it have been nice?
Yeah.
So I went and had these things made for the, and speaking of Nancy Cohano, we were trying to figure out how we're going to get the water up into those, because the window boxes had a drip system from every single building, because Doug King and all the other owners let us go into the cellar and look for the water system. And I had a friend that was a plumber, and he said, no, go ahead. And we went in there, each building, and we plugged into the water system.
Wow.
And we brought the little wire, not wire, but little tubing out,
Right.
and we put them in the window boxes.
That's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but when we decided on the hanging baskets, how are we ever going to get way up there and into the hanging baskets with that? Well, Nancy Cohano had a cousin who knew all about that system, and didn't she come along and set it all up? So we were very grateful to her.
Yeah.
And so
Good. Okay,
there you
so and now we know that the Eastern Garden Club has continued that those early beginnings that you started and were in charge of Southeastern. Two of the mediums there have been dug up and by our DPW, and then
Don't they look wonderful?
They look wonderful. It's on right there where Depot and 138 meet,
Right.
and just beautiful. And there are shrubs and there are ever-blooming flowers, and it's just magnificent.
Isn't it great? And now the next step is, well, I'll have to put this in a nutshell because I know we're running along. I bet we're running. Are we running
Oh, no,
beyond
we
our
run
time?
as long as we want.
Oh, okay. My husband, who, as I told you, loved to buy pieces of land for non-payment of taxes, and he was on Main Street, and he bought a postage stamp lot near Hilliard's, and in the woods, on the left-hand side, going towards Brockton, and it was 40 feet by 20 feet. And he paid $61 for it. Well, that has been there ever since he, 1960, I can't remember, 1960s,
Sure.
or whatever.
But now I know that the Garden Club, the town has accepted that property
Yes.
as a donation from you, and the Garden Club is going to put up a Welcome to Easton sign.
Yes.
And so
And I would only give it to them with the stipulation
That the
the
Garden
Garden
Club-
Club can put a sign there.
Right.
And it's going to take a while because we have to clear it and we have to make sure
Right.
conservation agrees
Now,
with it.
Besides Southeastern and besides the new Welcome to Easton sign, are there any other projects on the horizon that you know of beautification?
Oh, gosh, everywhere. Yes, there is.
For example,
We're going to do the, just before CBS on 123, oh, no, maybe not. 123 coming down to 138. That is awful
right,
looking.
yeah.
So that may be done.
So that's just next door is the Northeastern Savings Branch.
Yes.
Yes.
And we're earning our money, as you know, probably, with our Festival of Trees.
Right, and that's coming up starting on November 28th.
Yes.
And,
yes.
and this year it's going to be at the Easton Country Club, and we hope everybody will come, and I think it's only $5 to come and look. But then you buy, raffle tickets and put them in and take chances on purchasing all these wonderful trees. And each tree has a different motif.
Yes.
And so it's wonderful. It's just magical. And of course, many people like the lottery tree, and others others like the restaurant tree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
anyway, but we're getting off. But what I wanted to say was that any of you who have places in Easton that you think need to be beautified, you should get in touch with the Easton Garden Club.
Right.
And you can go online because it's eastongardenclub.org. It's our website, and just put
make
a note
a suggestion.
in there and make a suggestion.
Right.
Because
I would like to do a lot more scholarships too.
yes. Now, so that Festival of Trees that's
Here
coming
it is.
up is our major fundraiser. We also have first Saturday in December we have a green sale, and that's coming up
at the railroad station.
at the railroad station, which is the home of the Easton Historical Society. And that you better get there early, and some people get there even ahead of time, in order to get there, because you always get sold out.
We do, by 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And only supposed to go, well, we're supposed to go until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but we're always sold out.
Right, so don't come after 10:30 or so.
Right. Well, the Festival of Trees, there was a church in Methuen that was making thousands and thousands of dollars for the hospital, the local hospital, by having a Festival of Trees. So we sort of
Copied it.
copied it. So, and I've done a lot of trees at the Easton Festival of Trees.
Yes, you
now
always-
my daughter is sort of making the trees, and so I've stepped aside, and now I decorate. For instance, this year is going to be at the Easton Country Club, and I just decorated the main room and the mantle and all that, rather than make a tree.
Right. So let's go back a little bit. How did you get started being invited to the White House?
Okay, well, that is a very interesting story. Well, I'll show you a picture of, first of all, my daughter Rosemary. You should do a story on her, but that's another story. At any rate, my daughter Rosemary was executive producer for MSNBC News. And the reason I got to the White House was because once a year the White House has a decorated White House, and they invite the media only for one of their events to view the Christmas decorated White House. And my daughter had it, obviously being in the media, in Washington, D.C., was able to invite one person. And at any rate, so Rosemary was invited, and she invited me, her mother, and then she begged and begged and begged, and they said, all right, you can bring your father too. So we went to the White House, and I heard that was all voluntary. They were volunteers from all over the country. And of course, at that point, I was making a lot of demonstrations on Christmas decorations, and I was doing it everywhere. And so my daughter says, that's the head florist over there, if you want to talk to her. So I went over to her, and I said, I hear it's volunteers, and may I volunteer to help decorate the White House? Well, first of all, they couldn't stand the media because Hillary Clinton and he was in Bill Clinton, and the media was on her back because there were some papers that she couldn't find, and she couldn't find them. And at any rate, and so she was so unhappy about the media, and plus the florist, and she was in a terrible mood because all the media were there.
Now, the one who was in the terrible mood was the
White House florist.
She
looked down at me and she said, my dear.
Well, that's not hard to do.
And she
Gloria's
said,
so short.
yeah. And she said, do you realize that they come from all over the country, and they're very, very professional and so forth? And I said, well, may I send you my resume? Of course, she said. Well, this is what I sent her. This is what got me in like Flynn. Well, where is it? I just found it. Ah, here it is. I did a program at the Museum of Fine Arts because, you know, Art and Bloom?
Yes.
Well, they have a special day for speakers to come, 3 one day and 3 the next day. And I was on in the morning. Here's my picture.
Oh, yeah.
This was the brochure. I was on in the morning. In the afternoon was Martha Stewart. Now look at her long hair. That's how long ago it was.
Yeah, yeah.
And guess who this is? This is what did it. This is the White House florist's former boss at the White House. Well, I sent that on, and I got this letter so fast. We are inviting you to come and decorate the White House. Anyway, so it was wonderful. I'll show you these pictures on the screen.
And let us go back a little bit. How did you get to the Museum of Fine Arts? You had made a name for yourself by offering your floral design services to different groups in the Horticultural Society. You were invited to Australia.
New Zealand.
New Zealand, okay, and so forth.
How did that happen?
How did all that happen?
Okay. Well,
in a nutshell.
Easton Garden Club, because I was doing a lot of flower arrangements locally at the Easton Garden Club, the Catholic Church, Daughters of Isabella, down the street, wanted me to speak in front of them. And I did things. And then the Catholic Church in Brockton invited me. And then Avon, just the town of Avon, and then the town of Brockton, and then on and on and on. And I kept moving and moving out, and then pretty soon, years later, I was going up and down right down to, what was it in Virginia? Oh, not Annapolis, anyway. And I was going all the way down there, driving all the way down there, loading up my car. I had a big station wagon, and I was right up to the roof, and if I didn't load it the right way, I wouldn't get everything in there. And when I say loading it up with all sorts of designs, and mostly designs made of natural materials, and they were seeing things made out of things that they didn't realize that they could do. For instance, remember the heritage wreaths and the hydrangea wreaths and so forth and so on. And so then I was asked to go to Florida to do a program in flower arranging to their courses. Every year they have a course for flower show judges. And then from Florida, Bermuda, the gals in Bermuda wanted, because I was making designs that were using mechanics to put things way up in the air and so forth, and mounting weathered wood and all sorts of, and they wanted to learn that. So I was invited to Bermuda, and then they had a big flower show in Bermuda, international flower show. And
now you were invited by horticultural associations.
Yes, right.
Okay, it wasn't just a club or something.
Oh, no. In fact, when I went to Bermuda, oh, what a thrill that was. And then we had a flower show there, and anyway, I could go on and on and on. And over the years, I did the Newport mansions down in Florida. I mean, in Newport.
In Rhode Island.
And, and this whole thing, and this, I didn't have time to go through this, but this is loaded with scrapbooks where I went over the years. And over the years, I entered in every Boston flower show. Way back when, and so I would enter, and occasionally I won, and I also did miniature landscapes in the Boston Flower Show, which
that is amazing.
Did you see them? Did you see any of them?
I think I did. It's been a few years, but I think I did. Yeah.
This is in a window 30 inches by 30 inches deep, and the window at the flower show there'd be lines of people, and they'd come up to the window and they'd look in, and it would be a landscape, 1 inch to a foot, and if you had a 6-inch little tree, that was a 6-foot tree.
Yeah.
And
so it was all to scale.
All to scale in dimension. Further in, the smaller the material. So I did several of those, and I have 4 gold medals from that. See, now I hate it. When I was talking to my friends in the garden club today, I said, I'm really nervous about it because I don't want to brag. So I just told you something that sounded like I was bragging.
No.
I won those.
Yeah, of course. And you should be very proud of that. So that's not called bragging. Bragging is when you don't deserve the praise. So in these cases, the medals indicate that you deserve the praise.
Well, and then, of course, for years, I took care of the butterfly garden in the NRT.
Oh, yeah.
And that, I love doing it on an early Sunday morning with nobody around.
Yeah.
I loved doing that for years. And then Borderland, I was on the board for years, and they gave me an award for that. And then, oh, lucky me, being able to judge the Philadelphia Flower Show. Have you ever been?
No.
Oh, it's the biggest one in the world.
Is that
Except
right?
for Chelsea
Yeah.
in England. And
Now that would make a nice field trip for our club, wouldn't it?
fabulous. Yeah, we could go by bus.
Sure.
And then the highlight of my whole flower arranging career was international flower shows, which were called the World Association of Flower Arrangers. Every 3 years, a country would be the host country, and they would invite internationally from all over the world flower arrangers, to the point where you would have 600-700 designs all over the place in competition. And then the evening meeting, one evening meeting, they would have 7 people from around the world representing their country doing a 15-minute design. So putting it in a nutshell, from England, I entered and won a second prize out of 24 in my class, which was quite a feat. But at any rate, so I went on to Belgium. That was the next country, and I won a first prize. And that's where your mother was so excited, because opening night, it's usually royalty comes into the flower show with an entourage, and they come, and we're standing at attention by our design. And in Belgium, what's her name? Queen Wilhelmina, whatever. I mentioned her name to your mother. Oh, she was so excited. And we had to stand, right in front of our arrangement, and here she comes. And because it said United States on my design, she decided she would stop and say something to me. I know she said it first. Someone said to me, you don't initiate conversation with the Queen. Well, I didn't initiate it. She started talking to me. At least it looked that way. At any rate, New Zealand was standing next to me. She received, I think, a third prize. At any rate, she was watching me put my thing together, and she said, "How did you do that?" and so forth. Well, she went home and she told her flower arranging judges, "We've got to have her so we can learn how to work with our plant material," because their plant material was unbelievable. And so I got a letter from them asking me if I would come, all expenses paid, and teach the flower show judges in Auckland, New Zealand, all my mechanics. This is the one in Belgium. I'll put this somewhere. And that's an English magazine, and they had it on the front
Want to show
page.
it to the camera?
Oh, okay. And that was on the front page of this English magazine. At any rate, all expenses paid, and it would be 3 weeks. And when I got there, it was supposed to be only Auckland area, which is north. Well, pretty soon, they were learning all sorts of things, and the word got out to the South Island, and so they would be taking a boat over with a wagon full of stuff. How do you do this and how do you do that? And it was so exciting. I brought Louis with me, and every morning, and I was with a wonderful host and hostess, and every morning the doorbell would ring, and it would be the husbands of the judges to take Louis all over the island. He had a wonderful time. I'm working, but he had a wonderful time. At any rate, so when New Zealand became the country to host the World Association of Flower Arrangers, I was the one that was going to be on stage with 6 others doing a 15-minute design in front of the venue with 3,000 seats, and they had to have a screen over our head.
Sure.
Because they couldn't see.
Right.
And when I got there, and this time I went by myself, when I got there, I went up to the hotel, and I said, and I listened to Miss Pakistan was going to be on stage with me, along with France, Australia, who else? England. The widow of the president of South Korea, because she loved flower arranging, and she was going to be one of them too on stage, and so forth. But Miss Pakistan, I overheard her say, "I would like to know where the room is for my servants." Well, I said to myself, I think I'm in trouble. And so we were given a long table behind the stage to get ready for our performance. And I had an 8-foot, we all had an 8-foot table, but pretty soon, Miss Pakistan had the table over here. Pretty soon, I lost 4 feet because she was using my table too. And so I was going over here, and my design was huge, and I needed all that room. So I just went behind the curtains and did mine back there. So at any rate, but it was exciting. It was 15 minutes on stage, and I was the last one on, and some of them couldn't speak English, which was distressing because you're sitting there and you're watching someone do flower arranging. Well, they're not saying a word because they, but they did have pictures of their past designs. So when I got on, I walked to the front of the stage, and I had 2 assistants. They were all dressed in black because black background, and they had a wheeling thing with my big boxes of all my big pieces of wood. And I needed a big ladder. Took my shoes off. No, I went to the front of the stage first, and I says, I've been asked to do a 15-minute design, and I'm going to do it for you, and I will tell you how I created it as I go. Well, a friend of mine was in the audience. She says, we all woke up and went, oh, good. So I climbed the ladder. In the meantime, there was a mime in the middle of this, between the designers. You know what a mime is? Popular in New Zealand. You know what a mime is? They have a mask.
Yes, of course.
All right. At any rate, he'd go out and do something funny in between. So he said to me, because it looked like some of them weren't talking as they were doing, so he says, would you mind doing something? I says, what do you want to do? He says, this is what we'll do. So I had a last piece to put at the very top, and I climbed all the way up to the top, and it looked like an eagle, and the piece of wood. And so I looked down, I was on the ladder, and I looked down to my assistant. I says, bring up the last piece, please. No, just hand me the last piece. She looked in the box. This was planned. It's not there. It's not there? Are you sure it's not there? And she says, no, it's not here. So I said, what are we going to do? The curtains parted, and here's the mime with this big eagle. It came out. So anyway, that's one of the things I remember. It's not all that important. But that was quite fun.
Yeah.
Anyway. So I could go on and on and on and on. And I've had a wonderful time, Priscilla, at coming to Easton. And I still love my woods, and I love my dog, and Paul is wonderful, and I'm sure Louis is happy that he's doing all the things that he wanted to do. Louis was able to be there in 2 years before he started dying of a brain tumor. But well,
when you think about the chance invitation that Alice Kent McCarthy gave to you,
I lucked out.
That was the beginning of opening up all of your gifts and talents, which had been theretofore
dormant.
Buried and dormant.
Right.
And it was just as if somebody just unlocked the key to your creative energies.
Well, that's nice of you to say that.
Yeah.
That's very
Well, I was a creative writing teacher.
Yes, well, I'm going to have to remember that. I'm going to use that.
Oh, good. Well, yes, and also I'd like to put a plug in for myself. I'm going to be, as a retired creative writing teacher, composition teacher, I'm going to be offering tutoring classes, or tutoring individually to middle school and high school students, and starting November 1st.
Ooh.
So, and...
you mean creative writing?
Yeah, well, helping kids with their writing, because that's one of the biggest challenges.
With the cell phones.
And also, kids that are going on to college, the biggest complaint of professors is that nobody can write, and they can't express themselves. Well, some of you have read my letters to the editor, and that's enough evidence to show you that I am able to express myself very nicely.
Great.
Thank you.
And
I want to share that. I want to share that talent and help the students.
Well, I've heard that that they're unable to converse with each other.
Yeah,
unless they're texting each other.
Right.
Isn't that sad?
It is sad, and families now are starting to have, dinner without the cell phone on the table.
Oh, good.
And people are encouraging that, and because social skills are what keep people like you and I alive to beyond the limit of what is normal longevity.
Right, exactly.
Because we're social beings.
We are.
Yeah. And they say that's one of the biggest factors, to be active and socially engaged.
Yes, yes.
And that we are.
Oh.
So one of the reasons that I have appreciated your work is because I have always been involved in the creative arts
Oh, I know her.
myself, whether it's writing or my own floral designs. I'll never forget the time when there was a surprise party for mutual friends of ours. It was an anniversary, and I brought the hostess.
I know yours.
Oh, she knows what I'm going to say now. I brought the hostess a basket with 14 different varieties of flowers from my own garden. And I arranged them, and Gloria came over and she said to me, "Priscilla, what are you doing? You're trying to
outdo me."
Outdo me, right? Outshine me. And I said, no, you're a good mentor.
Yeah. But it was your mother, though. It was your mother.
Right, it was my mother. And it's so interesting because, a lot of people who are good cooks, they say, my mother never taught me how to cook, but I observed. Well, I'm the same way with, my mother was a good cook too. I should have observed more on that end, but on the flowers, I was a good observer. So it just came naturally to me to do that, and I love to grow the flowers and then create things. And
there's nothing like it.
Nothing like it. And there are plenty of people in nursing homes and people who are homebound. Some of you out there, think about it. Don't let your flowers die on the vine. Take some of them and put them in a basket. One thing you can do is take a regular straw basket, line it with plastic, and then put some Oasis.
Yep, and here you are teaching, see?
And make your arrangements.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Well, thank you, Gloria, so much.
Thank you for asking me.
Yeah,
I hope I did okay.
You did, and what a lifetime, and you're still out there.
I'm still, in fact, there's something at home that I'm going to be putting the FOT, and I'm doing it right now. But you did see that, because I point out this to my friends in high school, all the accomplishments, and it's on the wall at the high school. But the thing is, I say to them, not bad for a C student.
Well, you had other things on your mind.
I did.
Yeah, I was valedictorian of my class.
I know, so there's a big difference between you and me.
Isn't it amazing what influences impact our lives and
Yes.
how our personalities are changed and our interests are widened,
And it's just a series of circumstances for me.
Yep.
Marrying Louis.
Sure.
And coming to Easton, which I absolutely love.
Yeah.
And I mean, Allen Road, where I live, is right across from Borderland.
Right.
It's just
a walk away.
And Easton is wonderful in all their preservations of land.
And we are continuing. We have over 3,000 acres in preservation, I
Imagine.
understand. But when you think about 38% of 30 square miles is in conservation right now. And we, the Committee on Preservation, Conservation and Preservation has plans to connect the green belt.
Yes.
One of the things that's so interesting is that, how many of us see dead deer on the road anymore? We don't. And the reason is because this committee has been so careful to think about connecting parcels.
And they are connected.
They are connected. So the only one left at the Clover Valley Farm should be one that they should be picking up, because that will connect too. So now the deer and other animals, they don't have to cross roads. They continue in this green belt of conservation land, so we don't see dead deer.
And they come right through my yard and eat all the food, and then they go on to another garden.
Okay, well, thank you, Gloria, so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey down memory lane.
Well, thank you.
And hopefully those of you at home have enjoyed this as much as we have. And so until next time, take care. And one more announcement. Those of you who would like to appear on Growing Up in Easton, please give ECAT a ring and tell them you're interested. Choose somebody from your class or a friend who grew up with you, and we'll schedule the filming time. The number here is 508-230-7200. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.